Welcome to your new favorite bookish podcast, Fully Booked and Caffeinated. I'm Heather.
I'm Kelsey.
And today's episode is about the historical fiction novel, The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. This book does deal with the Holocaust, and while I do not plan on dwelling too much on what went on during the concentration camps, I just want to put a trigger warning out there that there will be discussions about some tragic events that happened at the camps, whether they're real or false in the story. Just want to put that out there. So before we get into the book, let's obviously talk about the most important thing ever, coffee. What are you drinking?
Well, I'm on my second coffee of the day because we're recording this on New Year's Day. And even though we are old, I still had quite a rough start to the day. So my first coffee was an Nespresso Creation double espresso pod vanilla coffee. Delicious. And then had to go out and run some errands, stopped at Starbucks, got my usual iced blonde latte with toffee nut syrup, and I got brown sugar cinnamon syrup today.
That sounds delicious.
It's very, very good, and it is hitting the spot.
That's what we love to hear.
Yes. What are you drinking?
This is also my second cup of coffee today because same.
Hard same.
Hard same. So this morning I just had a typical K-cup with some coffee from the fridge, but my second cup of coffee today is Dunkin' iced coffee, and I threw it back because I haven't had it in a while. I got the blueberry and butter pecan mixed together. And it's
classic.
The blueberry cobbler, as they call it. And it's still so freaking good. It still hits just as good as it did months ago. So,
did you see that they're calling it hazelnut bark?
Yes. And
Did you try it?
No, and I was going to, but if I hate it, then I'm going to hate myself. So I feel like I need to get it and then still be in the vicinity of Dunkin'. So if I don't like it, I can throw it out and get another one.
Yeah. It is good though. Eric got it yesterday.
Oh, good. Okay.
And it is good.
Yeah, because I thought it was the toasted white chocolate syrup and then the hazelnut unsweetened. So I was like, maybe I'll give it a shot. So
yeah,
we'll
it was
see.
pretty good. I mean, it's no blueberry cobbler, but it's good.
But I like that they're trying to come up with these fun little coffees. Like this month, they started the pink velvet, which is like a red velvet espresso flavor.
I can't remember if I liked that one or not. That's the same one that was out last year, right?
Yeah, and I did try the pink velvet macchiato, and it wasn't bad.
Okay.
So I might try it again. Who knows?
Yeah.
But anyways, cheers.
Anyway, cheers.
So Heather Morris was born in New Zealand, and she's an international #1 best-selling author who is passionate about stories of survival, resilience, and hope. In 2003, while working in a large public hospital in Melbourne, Heather was introduced to an elderly gentleman who might just have a story worth telling. That day, she met Lale Sokoloff, and he changed both of their lives. So she used Lale's story as the basis for The Tattooist of Auschwitz, which has sold 6 million copies, and her follow-up novel, Silka's Journey, has sold more than 1 million copies worldwide.
Wow,
yes,
that's impressive.
It is. So she did a follow-up to this book, which is based on a character that's mentioned pretty commonly throughout Tattoo of Auschwitz. And I believe there's a third book that she did based on sisters.
Okay.
But they weren't mentioned in this book. I think it's just a completely different story. But she kind of kept it tied in with the Holocaust theme.
Okay.
So I think it's sisters, but different, a different time, different experience. So in 2018, this novel was nominated for the Goodreads Awards, and it got nominated for Best Historical Fiction and Best Debut Author, which I didn't realize this was her first book. So again, choosing debut authors is apparently what we do, their first books.
But also, what a concept for your debut novel. Wow.
Well, from what I've read, she wasn't planning on doing a novel. She wanted to make a movie, it seemed like. She wanted to screenwrite something.
I did see that.
I think because she was so enamored with his story and how detailed it was, I think she decided to put it into a novel instead.
Okay.
That's
my
my
assumption. I did see somewhere that she originally had a screenplay in mind.
But it actually was picked up for a TV series by Peacock. And
really? Okay.
Production began spring of last year. Obviously, it got halted, I'm sure, with the strike. So there hasn't been a release date yet.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and they had the casting. I meant to write it down, but I forgot. It wasn't any super big names, but it was a couple common actors. So I'm actually very excited to see how that does. It'll probably, I'm assuming, be a limited series kind of thing. Probably 6 episodes or something. Because the book is very detailed, so you can definitely create a screen adaptation of this book.
Yeah, and there's a lot of characters, and they do give a lot of detail about those characters. Okay.
Right?
Yeah, it's like hard to wrap my mind around, especially with historical fiction sometimes, because to me, like we've learned so much about the Holocaust and all of that in the past. And it's like this book feels like it came out a long time ago, even though it didn't. And it's like, oh, and just recently,
I didn't even realize
a TV series.
And I didn't realize that I didn't realize like how recently this whole story became. I feel like it just became really big, like you said, like recently. Yeah. Because she only just wrote it. It's, what was it, 2018 it was nominated by Goodreads. So this is the first I had heard of it was last year. A friend had said his mom read it. And I was just starting to get into like historical fiction. So she said that would be a good one to check out. And it was. It was a good book. So I'm very happy that it was brought to my attention.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
All right. So before I read off the description of the novel, I just want to bring up that while this is a historical fiction novel, it is loosely based on real events. So Heather wrote an author's note about this, and I figured I would just read it word for word because I think it describes it pretty decently. So this is a work of fiction based on the first-hand testimony of one Auschwitz survivor. It is not an authoritative record of the events of the Holocaust. There are many accounts that document the facts of that terrible history in far more detail than can be justified in a novel, and I would encourage the interested reader to seek them out. Lale encountered many more guards and prisoners during his time at Auschwitz-Birkenau than are described in these pages. In some instances, I have created characters that represent more than one individual and have simplified certain events, while some encounters and conversations here have been imagined. That the events in this story occurred largely as described is not in doubt, and the information presented as fact has been sourced and researched. So looks like she did her job, researching as best she could. It appears that in the novel, some of it is, I guess, I wouldn't say glorified, but made to be maybe more interesting for
like fictionalized to make it easier to follow. I did see online that the son and her were having issues about like things that were untrue and all this stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because she's very open about the fact that it isn't true. So I wonder if that was when it was first coming out, because then even the version that I have, I don't know if for the same one that you have, he wrote the afterword for the book. So he was obviously involved in...
I do have that version. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also saw some reviews on Goodreads that people were upset that it wasn't, that the novel was fictional. And I was kind of perplexed because it literally says that it's loosely based on real events, saying that this is like a non-fiction historical Holocaust remembrance novel. She literally took the details of this man's life and fictionalized it, but also kept a lot of the details that are true.
I wonder if those people went into it thinking that it was something that it isn't. And like she said, there's so much material about the actual facts of the Holocaust and about, actual nonfiction books about it. Yeah. That maybe that's just what they thought they were getting into. And then afterwards, they were disappointed that it wasn't that. But she is pretty clear about it.
I know. And the book is definitely more about, love and survival than it is about the Holocaust.
Absolutely.
And so I agree. I think people probably read the title and they think it's going to be heavily Holocaust based, which obviously it is, but there's so much more to it than that. So who knows? People have opinions. Yeah. We have opinions.
And we do too.
So, but I digress. So, all right. So the description of the book on Goodreads is, in April 1942, Lale Sokolov, a Slovakian Jew, is forcibly transported to the concentration camps at Auschwitz-Birkenau. When his captors discover that he speaks several languages, he is put to work as a tattooer. There's a German word for this that I'm not going to attempt. I was thinking about it, but I was like, I looked up how to pronounce Birkenau, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to pronounce the tattooer or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Anyways, tasked with permanently marking his fellow prisoners. Imprisoned for more than 2.5 years, Lale witnesses horrific atrocities, but also incredible acts of bravery and compassion. Risking his own life, he uses his privileged position to exchange jewels and money from murdered Jews for food to help keep his fellow prisoners alive. One day, in July 1942, Lale, prisoner 32407, comforts a trembling young woman waiting in line to have the number 34902 tattooed on her arm. Her name is Gita, and in that first encounter, Lale vows to somehow survive the camp and marry her. A vivid, harrowing, and ultimately hopeful recreation of Lale's experience as the man who tattooed the arms of thousands of prisoners with what would become one of the most potent symbols of the Holocaust, the Tattooist of Auschwitz is also a testament to the endurance of love and humanity under the darkest possible conditions.
Ooh, it's got me like tearing up hearing that.
I know.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot. And I feel it's so hard to not emotionally relate to this book or feel you get so enamored by this story and obviously what this man went through, and just the resilience there's no words for it realistically. It's just truly out of this world.
And I think especially us living in the US, like our history classes and the way that we learn about things like this, like it's presented as 1, 2, 3 facts. You don't really get into the people who were there, the emotions behind it, the survivors. Like it's more just something to learn. And then I think a lot of us, as we get out of school, not that we forget about things like this, but we don't think about it in the same way. And this is just a really big reminder that whether this is fiction or not, there were real people existing and trying to hold on to some type of hope every single day.
Agreed. And it's I almost wish I read a story like this in high school.
Yeah.
I really do. I believe we read, what was it, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas? Was that a novel or something? I believe I had to read that for one of my classes, but this is just, it's a very emotional, gritty novel. And everyone needs to read it, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm going to recommend this book from here on out.
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a quick read. But when I was in college, I took as an elective an entire semester a class on the Holocaust.
That's
specifically.
Awesome.
And it was so informative, and I learned so much more that I had never learned in high school. And because I have, Jewish ancestors, like I felt like it was my duty to learn more about it.
Yeah, that's
and
really
it was
cool.
fascinating. And like the teacher was awesome. Like it could have been a really fucked up class. You know what I mean? But it actually, I really enjoyed it is the wrong word, but you know what I mean?
No, I understand, because it's a learning experience. It's literally a piece of our history, and
absolutely,
there's nothing wrong with being interested in learning about it and understanding. I think trying to put yourself in their shoes and understanding what they went through, and it's obviously the most tragic event ever.
Yeah, and the fact that people still say that it wasn't real. We're not going to get into that. We're going to focus on the fiction. Not. I'm sorry. My fault. I digress. Good. Let's get back to it.
So the novel begins with Lale riding through Europe in a train, cramped in a cattle car with other Jewish men that are not knowing where they're headed. So Lale offered himself up once he heard that the Nazis were forcing Jewish families to give the government a child older than 18 to be put to work. Interesting. Just
interesting.
Forcing Jewish families, not suggesting or asking, forcing families to give up a child.
They would be punished if they found out that a family had not offered up a child of age.
Yeah. So Lale, he had a sister and a brother, and he was like, you know what? I'll go. Don't worry about it. Because he always had an ambition to be a hardworking man anyways. So he was like, I'll do it. No problem. Unfortunately, was not what he thought it was at all. So when the train arrives at its destination, SS officers force the passengers out, yelling orders, and Lale follows instructions since he doesn't want to be inflicted with the violence that he's witnessing on other men. They're getting hit with the butts of the end of the rifles. They're getting basically punched or whatever. That's actually what it says. After they're herded into a building, the men wait for identification numbers to be tattooed on their arms, and Lale learns he has actually arrived at Auschwitz. So not even like a fancy job, but not some hardworking job that he was anticipating. The men are forced to strip naked and enter a large shower, and their clothes are replaced by striped prisoner outfits, and their heads are shaved. He's escorted to a nearby location called Birkenau and assigned to Block 7, sharing a bunk with a handful of men. The one thing I will say, that whether it was true or not, you really appreciate the camaraderie barbarity that these men had in this block.
Mm-hmm.
People are dying every day. They don't know if it's going to be their last, but they come together during so many different events throughout this novel. And it's, even though they're going through hard times, it's nice to see that at least they found some resilience to come together when needed.
Yeah, yeah.
So the first act of true violence that Lale witnesses is late in the evening when he goes outside to relieve himself. He notices 3 prisoners at the ditch sitting quietly conversing, and then before he can approach them, he just sees 2 SS officers coming near, and without warning, they just shoot the 3 prisoners before casually moving on. Like, oh.
And this is his first night.
First night in the camp.
First night. And the officers aren't shooting these men because they're outside of their bunk. They're literally joking, smoking cigarettes, and they're like, oh, I have a gun. There's a person. Cool.
Mm-hmm. The hatred is palpable. Yeah.
Absolutely. The unruliness is palpable.
Yes, that as well. So in that moment, Lale vows to himself that he will survive Auschwitz no matter what. So the next morning, Lale meets a man who is known as his capo, or his boss, and he assigns Lale to work on the roof of a half-built building, and there Lale meets 2 Russian men, and this is the first instance where Lale learns the ropes of life in Auschwitz, and he begins to understand what the power structures at play in the camp are, and this comes in handy throughout his entire time at the camp. He uses what he learns to his advantage, realistically.
Yeah, definitely. And he actually, in that moment, realizes the opinion that people have of Jews, and that some won't even associate with him. Even though they're all working in this camp, there is still this hierarchy. There's still, you know, different ways that they look at the different guards who are marked and the different workers who are marked. It's just, it's a whole, like you said, a whole structure within the camp.
It is. There's different hierarchies and everything, and Lale really, without even like meaning to, I feel like he really gets thrown into things and just kind of learns it as he goes. But in a weird way, in this terrible situation, he kind of has luck on his side a majority of the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's wild. It's actually wild.
Yeah. This is some of the parts where you're like, okay, some of this has to be fiction. Like, you're not this lucky.
I know. Oh, just wait till you get to the end of the novel, because that was my favorite part. So after witnessing another terrible murder, Lale faints and later learns that he contracted typhus and was unconscious for days. And he discovers that a group of prisoners from Block 7 were caring for Lale at night. So, like I said, the camaraderie of these men, basically when you contract a disease, they throw you onto a cart for the dead and dying. You could still be alive. It doesn't matter. You're getting thrown on the cart and you're basically taken to an unmarked grave, like with a bunch of other people. So he finds out that the men from Block 7 cared for him and
kept him alive.
And one of the men that helped him paid the price for it. You know, it was the first person he met on the train coming into camp. So it definitely affected Lale emotionally in that moment.
And it's mind-blowing because why? Like, one more person living means less rations for each person surviving. It means one extra person taking up space in that bed. Like, yes, there is that camaraderie. And it's like, how did they establish that so quickly? Like, obviously, Lale had this persona about him.
I was just going to say that. Like, he must have had some kind of energy emitting off of him that men wanted to follow him in a sense, or wanted him to be here.
Yeah, I think it was like positivity too, because
probably
a lot of people, you know, when they would ask him stuff, he wouldn't give them like a smart ass answer or anything. He would just be like, just do what you're told. We'll make it through today. Like, it wasn't necessarily positive, but it wasn't negative. And that's something, you know?
Yes, exactly. So he meets Pepin, who is the tattooer, and he was caring for Lale during the day after witnessing a prisoner save Lale, like I said, from the cart. And then he offers Lale a job as his assistant since he can speak multiple languages. And Lale hesitates at first, not liking the idea of scarring unwilling people, but he agrees. And one day, while re-tattooing a group of female prisoners, he meets a woman who leaves a lasting impression on him, and he committed her number to memory. This dude dude is like, I will find this lady in this camp.
So it's like, when you think about it like that, it's a little creepy and like grooming a little bit.
I know.
But...
He met her for the entirety of 3 minutes?
If
and
that.
It was just an encounter that clearly sat well with him, which is crazy. Anyways, not long after this encounter, Pepin disappears. Where'd Pepin go?
Do we ever find out?
I don't think we ever find out. Pepin must
probably means it's not good news.
I don't think it's good news at all. So Lale becomes the official tattooer, and he's assigned an officer to supervise him, Baretsky, and he's relocated to his own room in a different block of the camp, and he receives extra rations of food. Wild. I never would have imagined that this was a thing that prisoners would get, because he has this job of tattooing people. All of a sudden, he's kind of considered, he's higher up on the hierarchy of the prisoners. It's what
and it's like, that's a whole thing throughout the book, is that he has this guilt of kind of being a co-conspirator with, you know, the soldiers because he's trying to save himself. And so that's why this guilt pushes him to help so many other people and put himself in danger to help other people. And it's literally because of that guilt, because he is getting his own room. Are you kidding me? Sounds amazing.
When I read that, it took me aback for a minute, because I didn't realize that was a thing that happened in these camps. I just thought that these prisoners were just treated like shit every day. Not that he wasn't treated like shit, because obviously he was, but I didn't realize that there was some perks, I guess you could say, which is, again, wild. I'm even saying that. But anyways, like you said, Lale definitely deals with this guilt that he feels for having to kind of fraternize with the bad men, and he smuggles his extra food to the fellow prisoners, which is amazing. And he's helping these people survive. He meets Victor and Yuri, 2 local workers, and he starts to barter with them, which, again, I don't know how, I'm assuming this probably has to be real, or it has to have some kind of truth to it, because this seems too far-fetched to be fictionalized, in a sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and how else would he have been getting all of the stuff he was getting?
So he barters with them to get food and other goods, and Lale says he'll find a way to pay them. He doesn't want handouts. He wants to pay them somehow for giving him all these things. So he pays them with stolen jewels and money from 2 women whose job it is to go through the prisoner's former possessions.
Which was so baffling to me.
This is a crazy assembly line.
And they're just like letting diamond rings, rubies, jewels, money, just not even caring. Like, why aren't the soldiers taking this for themselves? And then we find out that some of the soldiers know about his little barter system and they get in on it. And I'm like, y'all could just go and get the stuff yourself. He's taking it from you.
I know.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. It really is. It's just this weird assembly line. Like, these women they pocket the stolen goods, gives it to Lale. Lale takes it, gives it to Victor and Yuri, gets food, brings food back, and then shares it with so many fellow prisoners throughout the camp.
And uses it as bribes to get other things that he wants. Like, he knows what he's doing.
Yes, he definitely does. So Lale asks Baretsky's help to communicate with the woman from earlier, and he discovers her name is Gita. So they arrange to meet on Sundays, which is when the prisoners are allowed to mill about the grounds. It's like recess. They can just do what they wish.
And be shot at any time.
Exactly. So, fun times. Gita is shy during their first encounter, but it is clear they have feelings for each other. This happens very quickly. Very, very quickly. Like, some might say, too quickly.
I am going to say this, and maybe it's because I'm a pessimist, but I can't imagine how you're falling in love this quickly in a concentration camp. I understand that it was something for Lale to hold on to.
Yeah.
But the way I just related more to Gita, where she's like just trying to live to see the next day. Like, she couldn't see a future with this guy because she doesn't even see tomorrow. Like, that's how dangerous and how volatile this whole situation is.
Yeah. And she also won't tell Lale her last name because she doesn't want to share this information until they leave Auschwitz. That's kind of almost her little seed of hope in her, that if she withholds this realistically not even important amount of information. It's something so small, just telling him her last name, but she holds so firm onto that I will not tell you my last name until we get out of here.
Yeah. I think it was like a twofold thing too. It's like, number one, something that she tells Lale, like, this is what you can look forward to. But also I think that she didn't want to speak about her past life in the concentration camps because it's like she didn't want to taint her past with what she was going through then. You know what I mean?
I completely agree. I think that's a really good representation. So at one point, Gita becomes ill with typhus, and everyone's getting typhus. And Lale obtains medicine and gives it to Gita's friends to administer it to her. And in this moment, Lale realizes how much he cares about her. He is head over heels in love with this woman. It was, for him, the literal definition of love at first sight.
Yes.
He had the smallest of interactions with this woman for their first encounter, and he was hooked line and sinker. He was just, I'm in it. This is the worst time of my life, but you are the bright spot, and I just need to run with it.
Also, I don't blame her for not believing him at first, because at that moment, especially when she's in line to be tattooed and the doctor is going through and picking out women seemingly at random and, removing them from the line, she's just had her head shaved. They're all in these uniforms. Like, she feels like the worst possible version of herself.
Absolutely.
And she's like, you fell in love with me then? Like, I don't trust it.
I know, which, again, I don't blame her because, like you said, it's literally the worst she's ever been. How could you fall in love with me at my worst? But he did. He literally
sure did. That's love, baby.
I know.
Or obsession. Either way.
Who could say?
Who could say?
So when Gita recovers, Lale insists that they will start a family one day and live free. And one of my things that I like that he said, which is romantic and cutesy. He's like, we will kiss and make love whenever we want. And I was like, oh, that's sweet. Probably not going to happen, but sweet.
Yeah.
Gita's understands that he really feels like this in his heart of hearts, that they're going to survive and that they can have this time together alone. But she obviously she's very skeptical about everything. Lale is
gotta be so frustrating because his positivity has gotta be a little fucking annoying sometimes.
I agree.
Because there's no basis for him. Yeah, you can believe that you're gonna survive, but there's literally no basis for them to ever think that they are getting out of there.
No.
So the fact that he's so insistent upon it, I would be like, dude, you're not helping anything. You're making it worse.
I know. And one of the instances that Lale uses bribery is he basically bribes Gita's capo with chocolate and other things so that these two can just spend time alone in a random bunk area, and they're just doing it.
They're banging.
Laying around naked. And I was shook. I mean... I can't say that I'm fully... I mean, I am surprised. But I'm not surprised that he found a way to infiltrate the system, because I'm sure that it happens in real life in general, especially in real life prisons. People always find a way to get what they want. So I'm not surprised. But this dude is fattening up this capo with chocolate.
But it's also some of these soldiers had no real allegiance. They were just doing what they were told. If you have a better offer, I'm going to listen to you. If you have a better offer, I'm going to listen to you. So, and like you said, it's the same in prison systems now. It's yes, bribery works, as fucked as that is. Yeah. And he was doing it, using it to have, time with the love of his life, but he could have been using it for,
oh my God,
horrible things.
Yeah, he absolutely could.
And they still would have gone along with it.
Of course. So eventually, Lale comes back to his room and he discovers two Nazis that have found his stash of jewels and money, which he kept under his mattress.
I was like, this is the end for our Lale.
You should have been I'm sure carrying it around with him all the time would have also been terrible, but at least it's on your person and you know where it is at all times, because people know what he's doing throughout the camp. Soldiers, prisoners, anyone could rat him out at any time.
There was a couple times where they said that he was getting sloppy, where he was still in the women's block later than he was supposed to be, and there's just, and he would say the wrong thing to Beretsky or whatever. There's a couple times where he's letting his feelings for Gita take his eyes off of the prize. You know what I mean?
It clouds his judgment 100%.
Exactly.
So he's taken to one of the punishment blocks where basically prisoners are tortured and often executed. executed. So Lale is more or less thinking this is the end. He's done for, is his assumption. So when the man who was sent to torture him arrives, Lale discovers it's actually a prisoner that he smuggled food to on his first day in camp. His name is Jacob, and Jacob really appreciated what Lale did for him that day. He was very hungry, and when Lale was tattooing him, he was like, okay, like, you stay behind, like, come meet me. And Lale, like, gave him some extra food. Just because this was the kind of guy Lale was.
And he encouraged him to basically do what Lale did and do anything you need to do to survive.
Yep, exactly.
Which got Jacob the
job
horrible job that he now has.
Beating other fellow prisoners. So he tells Lale he'll try to go easy on him and make the punishment look worse than it actually is when it happens. Yeah.
Which, holy shit.
Yeah.
If that's making it look worse.
Yeah, I know. He still gets his ass kicked, basically. So Jacob tells the Nazis that Lale does not know the names of the people who helped him smuggle in contraband, and to his great surprise, Lale not only gets released, but he returns to his previous posting as the tattooer.
This was the most unbelievable part.
Yeah.
I was like, because they even said no one leaves that torture chamber.
There was a part in the book that I saved because when barbarity comes back to get Lale and bring him back to the camp, he literally says, "You know something, tattooer? I bet you're the only Jew who ever walked into an oven and then walked back out of it."
Oh my god.
Yeah, that, then it says he laughs loudly, slapping Lale on the back and strides off ahead, which, dick. But that...
Because that was when he had to go into the crematorium to identify the numbers because they had a discrepancy with the numbers. And I'm like, that was one of the most powerful parts of the entire book for me, that he walks into this room full of dead bodies. Like, he can't even tell how many bodies there are because they're just all piled on top of each other and tangled all together. And he just has to see it, walk out, and go about the rest of his day and hold on to that, hope I get out of here one day. Like, how?
Yep. It's crazy, the things that he's gone throughout this book. And the fact that he got his job back as the tattooer, I'm just like, no.
And that they're not checking under his bed every single night. Like, he scales down the operation, but he sure doesn't stop.
Nope. Yep. So, rumors circulate that the Russian army is advancing onto the camp, and so the SS officers start to act nervous. They're quickly destroying the camp's documents. And during this commotion, Gita and many other female prisoners are rushed through the gates during a snowstorm. And it's during this frenetic scene that she yells her last name to Lale, which is Furman. So Gita Furman.
Okay.
Shortly after, Lale is put on a bus and the camp descends into mayhem. And so he's one of the lucky people that actually, I use that with very, like, a grain of salt luckiness. Right. But he's taken to a new camp in Austria, and he wins over a guard by impressing him with his fluent German. So the moral of this story definitely is that because Lale was so intelligent and could speak multiple languages, it's basically what has saved his life this entire time.
Absolutely. And he was able to camouflage himself in some instances so that people didn't know that he was a Jew at some points. People didn't know where he was from, and he was kind of able to be a little chameleon in that sense and be whoever he needed to be in order to win over whoever was, in that moment.
So in this moment, the guard is like, "Do you want me to transfer you to a safer camp in Vienna?" And Lale's like, "Yeah, of course I do."
Sure. All right, cool.
Of course I do. And so that story happens, and then we kind of get, which was nice, a chapter in Gita's point of view. And so during that time that Lale was becoming buddies with yet another guard, Gita manages to escape with 3 Polish women, and they seek help from a family in a nearby cottage, and they're able to avoid Nazi scrutiny, and they get help from Russian soldiers who drive them to Krakow. I never know how to pronounce it. Thank you. From there, Gita travels to Braslavia, which is where she's from, right? I believe so.
It's like the town next to where she's from, because she's from a small town.
Yes. Yeah. So back to Lale. At the concentration camp in Vienna, he escapes through a hole in one of the fences.
Pause. He climbs under the fence and just walks away.
Yeah.
And it's so mind-blowing. Not only the different concentration camps, because they do mention that a couple times, like even the guards talking about, oh, this one is much more strict. You're not allowed to have beer and cigarettes and this, you know what I mean? Like they obviously had different levels of horrors and treatment, etc. But then the fact that he just ends up at a place where he can escape, and it's also in the timing of where things are starting to collapse and, you know, things are starting to not come to an end because there's still time to go, but things are more tumultuous.
I agree. So after he escapes through the hole, he comes upon a group of Russian soldiers who take him as prisoner. And here we go again. Because Lale can speak so many languages, they bring him to a chalet that they turn into a headquarters, and they make him a liaison between the soldiers and women in town. Because even in the 1940s, men were gross.
Yep. And even in the 1940s, women did what they had to do to survive.
Absolutely. Can't blame them for that at all.
Nope.
So Lale would be given food and shelter and fine clothes, which I didn't talk about it, but Lale loved fine clothes. This dude loved a suit.
Loved a suit.
Felt like a real man in a suit. So he was very pleased that he was able to go back into this kind of clothing. So in exchange, he had to bribe the local women into coming to the chalet for parties, and Lale would offer them jewels and money to spend the night.
Which, when they first start explaining this job, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so hard. The first day, Lale's going to have an issue, and they're going to threaten to kill him, and it's going to be like this close call. No. He walks into the town, he's like, hey, anyone want to come party? And they're like, yeah, we know why you're here, and we want to come. Give me them jewels. Pick me up at 6. I'll be there.
I know.
Can't wait to see ya.
I thought it was going to be this whole thing where he was going to get punished for like not getting women, but they, like you said, literally knew what was going on, and they want that money. If we have to go hang out with some Russian soldiers for a few hours just to get paid, sure, we'll do it.
And they say it outright. Like, in order to have some good food for a night, we'll put up with the company of those men. We know that this is what we have to do to survive, and we're going to do it. And I was like, hell yeah.
So, not surprisingly, Lale charms the soldiers, and they trust him enough to drive into town on his own. Basically, Lale seizes this opportunity to escape, and he drives into town. And this is the part that kind of confused me, whether it's real or not. He just parks the car, but then steals a bike.
Yeah.
And sets off.
Like a bicycle.
So instead of just taking the car and just driving it to wherever he wants to go, he's, I guess, because he didn't want to get captured, he just leaves the car there and is like, I'm just going to steal this bike.
Like, I agree that the car is obvious.
Yes.
It's like a big red flag waving, but he would get there faster than he would on the bike.
I know. Exactly. And somehow he has this grueling journey, but he makes it back home. And he discovers that his sister is still alive, which is amazing in itself, that he still has family that survived. But he does find out that his older brother died and that nobody knows what became of their parents. So that's heartbreaking. That whole part of the book was difficult to read, but I'm happy for him that at least he had some family that he was able to reunite with.
Yeah, because at the beginning, he thought that him volunteering for this work would be sparing the lives of his family. And he really, I mean, obviously the longer he was there, he realized that that wasn't the case, but that really kept him going at the beginning.
I know, and if I recall correctly, the parents got taken away, what was it, like the day after or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was very soon after.
Terrible. So determined to find Gita, he goes to Bratislava, and while walking through the town one day, he spots Gita. Just sees her in the streets.
I mean, understatement, because he's stalking this train
he's
schedule.
Looking up, like, the Red Cross and literally at the train, like you said, stalking the train schedule.
But still, this is, like,
I know.
all of Europe that we're talking about.
I know. So they both fall to their knees, declaring their love, and Lale asks her to marry him, to which she says, yes, I will. The end.
I mean, it's so complex.
It is. Yes.
It's so horrible because they have these moments, especially when they're in her bunk and they're having, you know, talking about their future and they're doing their post-coital cuddling. And there are people being burned by the thousands, by the hundreds of thousands. And the ashes are raining down on them. And it's such a complicated thing that with all of that going on, they were still able to hold on to that hope in each other. Like, I get it. I totally get it that they needed that hope to hold on to, but it's like the idea of it and the actual act of it are two very different things, you know?
I agree. So typically we'll kind of do like discussion questions, but instead I wanted to discuss the themes that were in this book, because I felt like that was the best way to go about this one. So the first theme is survival and morality. So this novel is a pretty good examination of the lengths to which people go in order to survive harrowing, terrible experiences. And even though the circumstances are bleak and it can make it difficult to follow a strict moral compass, some actions are certainly more justifiable than other. So for instance, Lale being the tattooer. He doesn't want to do it, but he also knows that he will not harm these people that are coming through to get tattooed, and he can't say the same for someone else that might have the job.
He'd rather have it in his hands, that power.
And also having this job in the camp helped him survive as long as he did as well.
Absolutely. And helped Gita survive, and helped several of the men that he originally met. And just like the sheer number of people who were being brought into these camps. And then you start to see the dynamics of prisoners who were there earlier. So like the Jews who came in with Lale. Then once the Hungarians came in, people were pissed that they were coming into their bunks and trying to share space with them. And they're like, we've been here so much longer than you. And then even the Romani people. So they set up their own little community. And even though they obviously come to a very horrible, tragic end, the relationship that Lale had with them, and he's like, these are people that I never would have even associated with, people that I would have crossed the street if I saw you coming. And they agreed. They said the same thing. But he really appreciated how the kids would still play and the women would take care of other children that weren't just their own. Like, he saw these communities and he saw that they were focused on survival too, even with this bleakness and, horrible acts that were going on all around them.
Yeah, survival is definitely the most prominent theme of this book, hands down. Another theme is faith, love, and optimism. And this is basically, it showcases the way in which hope fuels resilience. Lale's love for Gita is 100% what pushes him. It's this power within him that he doesn't even know he has or had the ability to feel, and it makes him want to survive. He always wanted to survive, I'm sure. That's a no-brainer, but this makes him want to survive even more because he wants that future with Gita. He wants that life.
And he wants to live to see the people punished.
Yes.
And that is his motivation. And that part that you were talking about where that first night and he sees those men, gunned down, and he says, I'm going to walk out of here. I'm going to walk out a free man. He says, if there's a hell, I will see these murderers burn in it.
Yep.
So that was his original motivation. And the worst part is that even though they did end up walking away from and surviving the camps, they were never truly free.
No.
For the rest of their lives.
No. Yeah, it's true. Another big theme is definitely knowledge and power. Like we've been talking about the hierarchy throughout the camp and where certain people rated on a scale. So because of Lale's knowledge of all these languages he could speak, like I said, they benefited him during this terrible time in history. He was able to survive longer than he should have, definitely. And he uses his inside knowledge to benefit other prisoners. He's taking his extra rations of food, smuggling them out to these other prisoners, helping them survive another day, because that they're barely getting any food. And this literally him giving something to someone that one day could have saved their life. They could have been on the brink of death, and or again, kind of like that hope. They could have been just so destitute and didn't believe they were going to survive. And then I was like, have some extra bread. And it's just a small act like that. I could see definitely making someone feel that kind of hope in a sense that if he's able to do this, maybe there is a way out of it.
And to see that there's still some humanity left, because you see these soldiers who have no qualms about shooting someone for no reason. And then at the end of the day, there's someone else who's also starving and they're giving you some of their food. And at first, when he was bringing the extra food to his old block, and he said at first, like, I don't know, I don't want them to be fighting over it, and it might lead into, you know, it might end badly, basically. But it didn't. They ended up, you know, he was so proud that these men who that little bit extra was still not enough, and they were still divvying it up and sharing it. And like you said, that seeing that humanity could give someone that hope to survive just one more day.
Yeah, and he even, like, I think says he doesn't know how often he can really do this, how he can bring the extra food, but he's going to do it whenever he can. And it's an amazing thing that he's doing, because again, if he got caught, he would be executed immediately.
Oh, absolutely. And just the fact of how smart he was at manipulating people. Like, he has Baretsky on his back, who is trigger happy as hell.
Oh, yeah.
Would love to shoot him. And he plays him like a fiddle. Like, he... There's times where he's, like, mocking him by what he says, and Baretsky has no idea. He's just like, oh, yeah, good one, man. Ha, ha, ha. Like, and I'm just like, this dude is gonna shoot you. Shut up.
I know. It's true. And then also his capacity to, you know, manipulate the knowledge that he has to his advantage, like bribing the female soldier to get that extra time with Gita. Kind of like you said, being, in a way, mocking Baretsky when he shouldn't, but he discovers that this dude is not smart. But then also he kind of feels that guilt of talking to him about personal things as well, like his girlfriend and things like that. And it's interesting in itself that Baretsky also is willing to help Lale.
That's the weird thing.
Yeah, when to communicate with Gita.
Yeah, I think it was like a power thing. Like, I can help you, and then tomorrow I can decide not to.
Yeah. But it seems like he treated Lale better than I would have expected. And I don't know if that was if that was one of the parts of the novel that was more fictionalized, but but it's still interesting, that kind of dynamic that they had.
Exactly. And you have to think, like, yes, Baretsky loved having this power over him and loved this imbalance of power where he's obviously in charge, but it also came across that he was a lonely guy, that he was young, that he didn't really have that much worldly knowledge. So it's like, in a way, I wonder if he felt like Lale was not a companion, but like he got used to having him around. You know what I mean? So it kind of became like a normal thing. And then he would remember, oh, wait, I'm in charge of you. Yeah. But still,
I know.
You know what I mean?
It was this interesting relationship that they had. As terrible as he was as a person in this book, their relationship was an interesting dynamic to me. 100%. So yeah, those were the themes that I saw throughout the story. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss or add on?
Yeah, there's a couple things. We already talked about it a little bit, but I think Lale, knowing how he could manipulate all these people and knowing what he had to do to get what he wanted, and then a lot of times for Gita, it was clouding his judgment, which we talked about, but when he got her the job in the administration building, and afterwards he was like, oh, I wonder if the people in her block are going to be pissed that she has this administration job now and they're going to retaliate against her. Like, he didn't even consider that until after the fact. And then the other time where he has her female soldier go and like retrieve her from the administration building to bring her to the block, and she's like, are you kidding me? Like, I thought that I was being walked out to my death. Like, that was so selfish of him. And he didn't think about it. All he thought was, I need to see her. And so a lot of times it's a miracle they got out of there, because like we said, luck was on his side. 100%.
Somehow, some way, he definitely had luck on his side, because there were so many instances throughout this novel that he should not have survived.
Exactly. And the only other thing is, we talked a lot about the relationship between Gita and Lale, but I also loved the friendship between Dana, Ivana, and Gita. I mean, they literally nursed Gita back to health. And I don't think any of them would have survived without each other. Like, they held on to each other every day. And even when they were like walking around like linking arms and they got in trouble for it, it's like, for just a moment, it helped them forget where they were. And then even when Dana thanks Lale and Lale thanks Dana for, you know, taking care of Gita, like, it was just a really underrated part of this book. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree. That was one of the beautiful parts of this book, was that friendship between those women.
And one of the more believable parts, I will say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too. So typically when we do a rating, we do some, fun thing. I didn't for this one because I kind of felt insensitive. So I'm just keeping it stars out of 5 stars because I think that's fair for this novel. It was, based on a horrific event, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I literally finished this book in one day. It's not very hard. I know it's only like over 200 pages, and you probably do 400 pages a day, but whatever. For me, I was happy.
It's not a competition. We know.
For me, I literally finished this book in one day. Like, I was reading it at work, and then I came home and had to finish it that night because I was just so enraptured with this book and learning about the history and just this story. No matter what's real and what's false, it was a beautiful story regardless. The love and the survival, the hard times, everything about it. It made me like emotional. Like, it hit me hard. It was a really, really well written book.
I agree. I also rated this 5 stars. I think it's a complicated one to rate because, like you said, this is about a horrible, horrible time in history. This is about something that it's hard to look at it and say that this book made you feel hopeful or made you feel good or whatever. But when you take a step back and you just look at it for like the broader picture of focusing on survival and fighting for that every single day when all of the odds are stacked against them.
Yeah.
And it has you questioning your own morals of or your own values of what you would do in that situation because yes, he did work with the enemy and yes, he did, bribe these horrible people so that he could get what he wanted, but he also gave back and helped other people. It wasn't just a love story. If it was just this love at first sight, escalating quickly, banging in the bunks, like I don't think I would have liked it as much.
No.
But when you look at the whole picture and you realize that, like, yes, there are people who did survive and they had to go through more horrible things than this every single day. I don't know how I feel about writing a fictionalized book about, such a horrible thing in history. But after reading it, I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think
you know what I mean?
I think it's true in the author's note or wherever I had seen it, or I saw it online, reading about the author, that Lale did have a story worth telling. He 100% did. Anybody from that time, I feel like all their stories are valid and worth telling. So at least we got to put ourselves in that position and witness what he went through.
And as much of it is fictionalized or not, he's still a survivor and he still made it out the other side. Yeah. Which is amazing all on its own. So I'm really glad you picked this one, Heather.
Yeah,
I was unsure at first.
Me too.
I'm really happy that we read it.
Like I said, I had heard good things about it, and ironically, I had said to you, I was like, when is like the Holocaust remembrance? And it is in January, so that worked out very well. So if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, Thursday, January 4th, I believe that's correct. Our giveaway that I had discussed briefly on the December Bookish Banter and More episode will start this Friday the 5th, and the entries will be valid until Monday evening. I don't know what time yet. Look at the Instagram. I will have all the details posted, what we are doing, and how to enter, what you'll get if you win the giveaway. Again, it's just to kind of show our appreciation for all the listeners that we've had this past year. And yeah, I think that about sums it up. So that's all we have for you today. If you like what you heard, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you use. If you have any book recommendations or questions for us, you can email us at fullybookedcathpod@gmail.com. Also, be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at fullybookedcathpod to see our upcoming reads. So thanks for checking us out. And remember,
if you need us, we're fully booked. Bye!